Hello everybody, Brian here from quantlabs.net. In this video I wanted to show you some discoveries that I've made as I dig deeper into using Visual JForex and some surprises I wish I caught earlier, but it doesn't matter, but it's important to know. Now if you are a non-programmer trying to generate your own strategies, I think this tool, Duca's Copy Visual Forex, is fine. But if you're a coder and a seasoned coder at that, looking for good clean code, I'm going to show you the code that is generated by this tool. I just want to show you how cryptic it is. So I'm going to load in this strategy here, strategy supply and demand. There's a webinar on it. I've done a brief video on it. So you should go through my playlist under Duca's Copy and look for that video. And you can follow along. So here's the strategy, and this is a webinar. So obviously I've shown this before when you can see the code right here, and it's not exactly pretty code, and I'm going to show you what I mean. So first of all, another big thing that I've noticed is with JForex, it's not that reliable. So for instance, I have control here in the strategy list. But if I want to remove a strategy, you can see here it's not doing what you would think it should do. And right now it just goes in these weird states. I don't know, but you can see it's really buggy, and I have to restart the platform, which isn't a good sign. Now I don't know. First I thought it was one of my strategies that I was working with that I generated, but this is something from my point of view that doesn't excite me. Using this platform, this is the first time I've seen it. So I don't know if it's an update or what, if the strategy will work or not, but I just want you to be aware of that. Now, here's another problem. So I'm gonna quit this platform and relaunch it. And this is the latest one of JForex 3. So let's see, we'll have a clean session now where I'll try to remove that strategy. You'll see it should get removed, no problem. Now I'm just showing you some of the weird nuances I'm having with Duca's Copy. This is just one of them. Another, I'm going to show you the code that gets generated by this strategy that I'm about to show you. So you can see here I don't have any strategies stored. So with that in mind, let's go through the code. So I've shown you the code here, and you can deploy it into JForex as we know. I've shown that before. But the strategy sort of runs, just runs in a very weird way. So I'm going to load up that strategy, the code of it, this one. And I'm going to show you the ugly code that it generates. Okay, the first thing I notice is that it's not a real problem, but the classes are all included in one class, which is fine. Kind of breaks the best practices of Java. So there's 3 classes in this Java file. So there's the strategy itself, the candle, and the tick. So you have the candle and the tick. So I can see why they do that, just in terms of a packaging reason. So let's check out the code. So if you go through here, you'll notice we have all these blocks. The block name references get really, really confusing. So in order for me to find this, I had to go through all kinds of weird ways. So I ended up putting print statements throughout this program or Java file. We know that on starts the very first one that launches these strategies. on messages called all the time, as well as on tick on bars. So we know that. So when I did my test, we were just calling on bars. But in the strategy here visually, oh, it is just on candle. Whoops. Anyway, so we know that. So the first thing here is we have this method called update variables, which is called every time method, every time the message or candle comes in, which is fine. That's really doing is just updating the order list and pending orders, and just keeping on track of the orders, if they're filled or not, which is what I would assume is normal. So that's all fine, but when you go into on bar, here's where the funky crap starts. Right here we have our very first if block underscore. Now I was like, what does that mean? So you can see right here, these method names that are generated by the tool, you can see I know that's because it's created by Visual JForex Generator, right? So that name that I just showed you, this if block 10, I mean going, what is that? So it took me a while to figure out what it was, and then I finally figured it out. Now, if you're a coder, that is probably something, if I had a coder doing that in my operation, I'd probably get rid of them pretty fast. We like mnemonic names, meaning that they refer to something, not block XYZ, in this case, block if block 10. So let me just find it in the source code here. And our editor is just not finding what we're looking for, but I know it's in there. So let me just find it. Here we go. So this is our first reference. So this flow means it's running. So if you set it as 1, means that the block is running. So this is what's generated by that Visual JForex Generator tool or converter. So when we look at the blocks themselves, what we're looking for, which again, here's where the ugliness of the code comes in. You got just a generic argument 1, argument 2, and this is referring to get period and the default. So you can see in here that we've got some basic checks just using argument 1 and 2, and do an else if, and if all checks out, meaning if argument 1 and argument 2 are equal, then go to the next block. So let me show you visually what that refers to. So this is it right here. So you can see here we're using get period and default period, and if it equals, go to the next step. And that's essentially what we have. So we have argument 1, default period, and then we do all the checks, and right here is that actual condition that's checked. If argument 1 equals argument 2, argument 1, argument 2, and then go to the next block, which is right here. So you can see here it's not very descriptive. You always have to refer back to these blocks to make, like, what does this mean if you didn't have the the VFX file for the Visual JForex tool. So going back to the next line, we do the same thing. So we know we're looking for get instrument and the default instrument. So here we go. Candle, instrument, default instrument, and if it's equal to, only equal to. So here we go. And again, this is the only check it does. So it'll go to the next one, which is get historical candle block 12. So you can tell that these are the type of blocks you're dealing with, but if you want to look at the arguments, they kind of make sense, but let me just show you this as one last example. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 arguments: default instrument, period, bid, and shift. So you look in the code, it's exactly that: instrument, period, bid, and then 2, which is a shift, and then subscription instrument check. Okay, and then gets the bar right here, and then it generates this new candle from it using these predefined arguments. So it does, it just the coding is just bizarre. And then it goes to the next one, if block 3, same thing. Then we have an ATR block. This is where it gets really weird. So this one is the ATR block, which is the ATR indicator, which is this one right here. So again, we have 4 arguments: instrument, period, shift, and time period. So when you look at it, you got instrument, period, shift, and I forget what that 21 was. Time period, 21. Right? So now, look at this. The code creates a generic object class or array, has another parameter. I mean, it's crazy. If you're not a non-programmer, you don't care about this stuff, but when you're trying to, let's say, debug it, it's a complete, dare I say, nightmare, because you think that's bizarre. Look at the return object, just a generic object, indicator result. So we have calculate indicator, argument 1, 2, 3, with the offer side. Then we have to tell it's an ATR, apply price, parameters, blah, blah, blah. And here we are, object, and then the indicator result. This is where it gets crazy. If it's a double, and you have indicator result of the very first element is equal to null, then it equals not a number. But if it checks out, here we go, ATR candle, ATR 21 candle 1, cast it to a double array, and then again we want the very first result. Now tell me if that's not confusing. Yeah, I mean, look at this calculation. What are we doing here? This one right here. This is crazy code. I mean, I understand the logic of it, but it's just not very efficient looking at it. So we have here ATR 21 CDL underscore 1, 2 as a second parameter, and our calculation type is division. So if you look at the code, we have to define argument 1, argument 2, and then our result, and then move on to the next step. There's just a lot of extra code in here. It's like, I don't know, something I wouldn't be comfortable with. But there is a solution. Here's the solution. If you come under here, under if you do a search for Duca's copy API example, partial close, what we can do here is we have different closing types, orders. So if we do partial order close, partial close by price, which is exactly what I'm looking for, but we're basing it upon ATR percentage that we can set dynamically for our so-called position manager. And here's our simple code, very simple and easy to get. You want the sample code, you can download it here. But make sure you choose partial close by price. So let me load it up and show you how it works. So here's the code in our JForex. Now let me load up the strategy. So here we are in the second part. Just going to load up the code now, or the strategy. As I said, it's called partial close by price. And what I'll do is I'll launch it. So what it essentially does, you can see it puts orders in right away. When you look at the messages in here, this is the first time we're actually getting this. We have our buy, and sell. So we have our fill, and then we have now finally a closing order and the result of that. So we know that we're ordering, we're sending out orders. So here's our partial close by price log. Order's been put in, related order close okay for Euro US dollar, and at the same time we can do notification to sell with maximum slippage. So I'll show you the code, but this may be probably one of the smarter ways to do it. I just wish I discovered this a while back, but at the other end of it, trials and tribulations of working with these type of APIs with brokers. So let's go through the code here. So we're closing out partial close by price, which means opens an order, attempts to partially close the order by price, one that fails, one that succeeds, and eventually gets it closed in full without any price condition. So you can see how short the code is, which is good. So here's our interfaces that we're going to use. We know about the on start, get the engine, console, history. Here's our latest bid on tick level. Then we tell the engine for the submit to order, but we send a message. The label is called order partial close with our instrument that's already defined, which is up here, which is again, of course, the Euro US dollar. And then we're just doing a very simple set of commands here, which I agree with, but we'll make it more sophisticated as we move along or progress. So we're setting in a buy and 1 unit of one order. So I guess we wait for an update for it to open and then to get filled, probably 2 seconds here. So once we know that's taken place, now it says here, should fail, order close rejected since it is unlikely to have liquidity at such a price. All right, so if I remember what I was reading here, this is units of 1 million. So I don't know why they designed the API that way, but I believe that's essentially saying 1 million units. So I have to confirm that, but that may be the case. So if we're doing 1 million units, obviously there's going to be no liquidity. It will fail. So we're trying to do the close. As such, wait for an update. And then what we're trying to do here is do the same, I believe. I have to look at what the parameters are. We could easily do that. So we're trying to do a close. Do this copy API. No, just do Java docs. Is it order close? So assume it's this one. So we want close. So there's different parameters. How many parameters are we dealing with here? Actually, okay, so we have 1, 2, 3 parameters. So we'll look for the one that's got 3 parameters right here. So we have our amount, sends a close, request to close the position with a specified amount. The price and the slippage. Okay, so what we could do here is, if we know the amount and we know the ATR, we could easily just calculate the price that we want to close out at and make the attempt in our own code. So that's a pretty easy way to do it. Just go back to the code here. So I guess it's trying to close at 30% of the position or the order, and then this is the amount that it's trying to close at. Wait for an update or close the rest in full, and then stop the strategy. So that's a pretty simple set of sequence of commands to fulfill an order, which is pretty simple actually when you think about it. So from an architecture point of view, the way I do it, I will, I guess, have the ability now to go back to looking at Redis and sending the orders through the pipe or the message queue with Redis, and just have, again, the Python originally deciding what to do on the analytics strategy, and just put in the order itself, and then have the listener here just essentially waiting for those messages to come in somewhere. That's probably the best way to go about it. So here's a message of what we get printed out. Let's verify that. Yeah, so here's all the messages in partial close by price, and then everything else is just default. So it's a pretty simple strategy. It's kind of unfortunate of the quality of the code that I just showed you earlier from this. I'm not saying that this tool is no use. It's just from a coder or my kind of experience. Yeah, I think doing it by hand is still maybe the better way, but the roundabout way. I'm trying to be lazy here, but it's no different than trying to use the code generated by something like Simulink from MATLAB, where the code was just pretty well indecipherable. This is not so bad, but the construction of how to do things is really, really, I don't want to say bad, but it's just, I mean, where is it? These returns here on generic objects is pretty, what am I looking for right here? Doing this way is just, wow, that's pretty gnarly coding. I mean, it's generated by a tool, we know that, a converter tool, but just something to be really aware of versus, you know, this type of coding is much cleaner, much simpler to look at if you're an experienced coder. But if you want the lazy way, the easier way, definitely you want to go with the converting from the Visual JForex tool. But I'm probably going to just stick it out with, as I described in this example. And as I said, there's other ways to partially close, so you can close out over 3 increments. So what I'll assume here, if we look at the code, so I'm assume, so that's on bar. What I'd like to know is, so we start her up. Strategy starts, opens up, and in 3 increments partially closes the order until it has been completely closed. Strategy gets stopped once the order has been completely closed. So in this case, what we're doing is it's been filled. We make three attempts, I believe, until it's fully closed. So I guess the first 3 will close it. Like the first one would be 40%, next one would be 80%, and the third one would be 100 plus 120, and then it will close out the position. So there's different ways to go about it. Now, in terms of orders and positions, if you are into the position managers I hinted at, where you have a soft target and a hard target on your position based around how you feel in the market condition with the market conditions, you may just want to put on a half a position in your order. So you could look at a conditional order, or maybe a modified order set of examples. So there's various examples here that we can use, but I'll update as I move along to get this solution fixed up. Hopefully it'll help you out later.